On their own, each is a powerhouse, actually. Together, that makes them a power couple. And then what puts them over the edge is their son is Gauravani Prabhu. So that makes them a power family. They've both done so much for Srila Prabhupada and for ISKCON and for all of us, paving the way so that we can access bhakti. You were initiated like 1976? 1976. Kind of, so a little bit late, right? But the service that he's done in the decade since he was initiated is staggering. He's helped our society survive when it's faced deep, dark challenges. And Anuttama was there putting out fires. And Rukmini Devi inspiring so many people in so many ways, especially the women of ISKCON, who for so long were neglected in a lot of ways. Rukmini is there for their inspiration, and she brings such light to the whole movement. So we're really privileged to have them both here speaking together. Please join me in welcoming them.
One thing you didn't mention, I was late, 1976 initiated, but Rukmini was initiated in 1968. So she was actually here when Prabhupada was here, right? She's going to tell some actual stories.
You were actually got second initiation up the street at the bar?
Yeah.
In the bar.
Gray mare.
The Gray Mare, yes.
Yeah.
I just want to,
Does everybody know that it was Yadunath's birthday the other day?
yeah.
Oh, everybody knows we leave the whole thing and stuff.
April Fool's Day, isn't that hilarious? Just so funny.
So we're both going to share some thoughts, and we have a short video. We wanted to share parts of it for about 4 minutes. I'll explain that
They
in
can
a
watch the
bit.
whole, tell them how they can watch the whole thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, first I want to thank everybody for being here and for inviting us to be here. We're actually on our way to Boston, where this film was made, in the same room. Actually, there's an event on Friday where Professor Frank Clooney is having a dialogue with Rananath Swami about bhakti. So we're heading up there. So we stopped here on the way. It worked out very well. And we were specifically asked, I guess as you do every Wednesday, talk about the historical importance of this place. So just wanted to share a few thoughts. I'll go first. Generally ladies go first, but we thought better Rukmini comes later because that way we have a grand finale. So that was our plan. So I was thinking about a little bit on the way. I like to visit historical places. I read a lot of historical books. I read a lot I go to museums and go through the bookshops. And I've been to Lincoln's home in Springfield, Missouri, right? Missouri, I think? No, Illinois. And then I've been to Rome, and we go to Europe and we visit the old cathedrals, and DC is full of the monuments, and you go in to see where they took Lincoln across the street where he passed away, and I like historical places. We know, most of us know, some of us are maybe a little bit new, actually, we are sitting in a historical place that is of the same caliber. Now, if you say that to most people, they're going to think that's nice we have that sentiment. We'll talk about that like in a couple minutes. But it's a very humble place. It's been fixed up very nicely. I was learning before the ceiling panels are the same as they were. The dais where Prabhupada's sitting is a replica of that. Some of the paintings are original paintings. Some of them are duplicates of what was the replicas of what was here before. So it's very, very authentic experience for all of us. And of course, hearing Prabhupada chant the recording from what he was chanting here. So it's a humble, beautifully reimagined, recreated place. But also, we should keep in mind that many of the world's great historical places are also very, very humble places. You go there and you may think, well, there's going to be something really phenomenal in terms of the size, of the grandeur, and then you realize, oh, actually, that tradition or that history or that culture started in a very small place. The same way the Hare Krishna movement in the West started in a very, very small place. But this is the place, if we stop and think about it for a bit, this is the place, this was the very first temple. in the whole world, and we can't even count. We're not sure how many temples there are. It's around 1,000 communities, but then there's a whole question. There's so many now. How do you define a temple? What's a temple? What's a center? What's a preaching center? Which one has deities? Which deities are, it's like, it's so big. It's become complicated. So that in itself, this is not a complicated place, but it all started from here. This is the first temple. So this is the place where ISKCON was incorporated. This is the place where the one lawyer probably said, okay, Mr. Goldsmith, I believe,
I think so.
said, you can talk now. So the one man, and thank you for wearing a tie tonight to help us reimagine that. Are you a lawyer?
He's a lawyer.
Fantastic. This is really authentic. Did you bring the documents for us to sign?
I actually have a copy in my office.
Okay, you should have brought it. Should have brought it. We would have re-signed it tonight. But that's Prabhupada gave his talk and then said, okay, Mr. Goldsmith, you have the floor. And he stood up and signed everybody up. And ISKCON started. And it's described, a lot of people thinking we're kind of humoring the Swami. I mean, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, etc. So ISKCON started here, the first temple started here, the first classes were here. These days everybody likes to go online and listen. There's hundreds, maybe thousands of classes a week connected with ISKCON around the world. You can choose whichever one you want. The first ones were here. And the founder Acharya was here for all of that. The initiations were here. So the first disciples came from here. We know there's so many disciples around the world. The first Harinam came from here. Everything came from here. If you see pictures of the Mayapur temple, this big, gorgeous, huge temple soon to be opened, we should all think it started here. This is the root. When you think about all of the prasadam distribution going on around the world, it started here. If you're ever feeling a little nostalgic and you're in a grocery store, because these days they have to get old people in the mood to spend all the money, and you hear My Sweet Lord in the grocery store, you can think, I know where this started. Because it started here. Probably, of course, didn't meet George Harrison here, but from here the movement grew, and all of those different things, all those wonderful things happened. I was just rereading Shyamasundar Prabhu's book. Doesn't talk as much about here, because he was San Francisco based, but I was just reading the section where there was a production of the Hair musical in San Francisco, and they went at Harinam outside because they were the real thing that they were talking about. So if you ever see that makes its rounds again in New York, it's like it started here, at least the lyrics where they're chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. So it all started here. This is really a very, very significant place. And so we may say, and certainly I would say it's very, very important, but somebody may think, maybe somebody wonders, and it's like, isn't that quaint? This little humble storefront, and it's their place, and it's kind of special. It's kind of like, you meet a couple sometimes, and they're like, our first kiss was on that bench. Nobody else knows the pigeons poop on the bench. It's like nobody cares about that bench, but in their mind, that's a really special bench. It's not like that. There's a lot of storefront religions around the city and around the world. Most of them are going to last for a short time and go away. From this storefront religion, a lot of things happened and are continuing to happen. But somebody might say, well, yeah, because, we're both disciples, or all of us were followers, appreciators, to some degree or the other, of Prabhupada's contributions, of what happened with ISKCON. When you go someplace else, you go to DC, and, you can meet somebody who's the curator for a museum, and they'll talk about a particular painting and how important it is, and we all think, well, isn't it cute how he or she thinks it's so important? Isn't that really wonderful? Well, the fact is, we're in a place that actually is that important, and it's that wonderful, and the world's just starting to figure out. But it's not just because we believe, because we're followers. So to add testimony to that, we have a short video. Let me explain what the background is here. First of all, it's from YouTube, which means if I have to jump up and turn off a really gross commercial every now and then, it's not my fault. It's not recorded that way. It's just, you all know how things work. So let me do this. Okay, so the lady in the middle, you can hear from in a minute. This is a recording from Harvard Divinity School. We had a anniversary there. This gentleman on the left is Shana Kirmani, who passed away a couple years ago. He met Prabhupada at Harvard University. He was a student. I can't remember if I queued up that part of it.
You should tell that story.
And he was walking down the hall. He's Muslim family. He's walking down the hall from India, walking down the hall, and he kind of looked in and he saw this saffron-dressed man sitting half lotus pose. I think he's going to explain that. And he stopped in his tracks. He didn't go have his go to the library, meet his professor, whatever you're supposed to do. And it had a tremendous effect upon him personally. So I've just got a little bit of his clip, and the main thing I want you to listen to is from the keynote address at what is known as the Sperry Room at Harvard University, where Prabhupada spoke. This was recorded in about 9 years ago. We're having the 50th anniversary of ISKCON, so we had this academic conference at Harvard. This whole video you can find if you want to Google it. Later you may want to, I can tell you again. It's just look up Harvard University 50th anniversary, and it's a 16-minute film. Okay, so we're going to play this clip. Initially, a little bit of Shani Kirmani talking.
So it's on
After-
YouTube, right? People can find it on YouTube.
Yep, on YouTube. So he'll speak for a little bit after the obnoxious commercial and may jump in. And then the main thing is Tom Hopkins. And please pay close attention when he speaks, because this is my evidence that what I'm saying about the importance of this is really important. And you're going to be a little, to use a phrase of the 60s, this is the 60s place, right? You will be blown away by his comments. Okay? Don't be blown away by the commercial.
In May 19, I was here. As I rushed to the library through these corridors, when I passed by this very room, the sight was startling. On the table in front of the room, and in saffron robes, there sat a man in a modified Padmasana yoga pose. It stopped me in my tracks. At the door, I stood. I'd never seen anything like this before. Not at Harvard. It doesn't happen. He was talking about Lord Krishna, the Bhagavad Gita. He talked about peace, all serious subjects for me. Curiously though, alongside these serious subjects, he was also talking about delight and happiness. Most of the members of ISKCON in 1966 knew almost nothing about
This is
the
Professor Thomas Hopkins.
devotional movement and its participants, or about the later figures who shaped the Vaishnava tradition of Bengal that in September of 1966 laid the foundations for ISKCON. That is to say, they knew
You may
almost
recognize
nothing
some of the
about
background
Prabhupada's
film.
background or where he got his
This
teachings
is here, of
and
course.
practices. As a historian, we have to look at the historical situation. And the fact is that there was no clear parallel. There had been no clear parallel. The obvious parallels would be Jesus' founding of Christianity and Muhammad's founding of Islam. Jesus' ministry, however, was among his own people and his own culture. And he had the help of adults, his own age, his disciples, to carry his movement forward. The same thing can be said of Muhammad, who had from the beginning followers from his own culture and his own family to help him establish his movement. Prabhupada, by contrast, was one elderly man in a totally unfamiliar culture, with no one else from that culture to support him, and a group of followers initially at benchmark 0. Moreover, unlike many earlier missionaries from Hindu India, he was determined to establish not just an outpost of Hindu devotion to Krishna, but an outpost of Indian Bengali culture as well. He wanted to carry a whole cultural tradition across a huge cultural separation, and he set out to do it himself. He thus not only taught his followers how to practice devotion to Krishna, the Gaudiya Vaishnava way, he also taught them how to cook, how to dress, how to conduct themselves by doing these things. And of course he taught them Sanskrit, he taught them texts, and he taught them how to teach all of these things to others. He was, in short, a one-man channel for an entire cultural religious tradition, starting when he himself was already 70 years old. How did this work out? Time will, of course, tell. But here we are, 50 years down the road, and looking ahead as well as back. And I might add in closing, ISKCON has on the record done at least as well as Christianity and Islam did in their first 50 years, because both at that point were having serious problems. So may the discussion begin. Harry Bowl.
So you can see the room. This is from, I mentioned the Sperry Room at Harvard University, same place where they're having this dialogue on Friday, just across the street from the Harvard Center, Harvard Center for the World's Center.
The Study of world religion.
Center for the Study of World Religions at Harvard. So that's where the conference was held. But just to refresh in case you didn't get it, he's a professor of religion. He's speaking as a historian, and he says our job is to make comparisons. If I look at Bhaktivedanta Swami and try to understand his contributions, I have to look for comparisons in history. And I can only find two people in history that I can compare him to. Jesus and Muhammad. Now again, I didn't say it, he said it. So we're sitting in the room where this person, this professor who knows his stuff, compares to Jesus and Muhammad in the place that he started it all. And as he says, it's interesting because he says, in one sense, you can't compare them. Because Jesus was in his own country, his own language, his own culture, and he had people of his own age. Muhammad was his own country, his own culture, he had his family and his friends to help him. Prabhupada came at 7 years old, he had nothing, in that wonderful picture where he says ground zero. In the sense of, it was really ground zero, when he started here. So in that sense, when we enter this very sacred space, it's important for us to keep in mind that it is actually that significant. And of course, it's going to be a few years before everybody catches on. There's a lot of people catch on. You know, you can't, every time I ever come here, there's 50 people outside taking pictures, you know, in front of the place and all of that. But not so many people have caught on. But gradually over time, more and more people will understand the historic significance of this place. So the fact that we're all able to come here, that you're all able to come here, we shouldn't think it's just an ordinary experience. I know just, I mentioned in the beginning, I like history. When I was in Springfield, Illinois a few years ago and I was taking the tour, I was making sure I hung back. So when the lady said things like, the only piece of furniture in here that Lincoln actually had was that cabinet. So I would wait till everybody left and then I would go and touch the cabinet. So that's Lincoln, that's whatever, a few, 150 years ago, right? And he had a very significant impact on history, and in terms of most Americans are concerned, very important person. Prabhupada, comparing to Jesus, you think about the contribution Jesus has made around the world, the contribution of Muhammad around the world. I mean, those are, the whole earth looks upon them as being two, perhaps, most influential people in the whole world, and a professor of religion at Harvard University, in front of Harvard professors and Harvard students, putting his own scholarship on the line, is saying, actually, Bhaktivedanta Swami can only be compared to those two people in history, and in some ways, his contributions are even beyond what they achieved. And then he goes on and looks into the future. He says, here we are at ISKCON looking 50 years back. This was the occasion of the 50th anniversary. He said, certainly there's challenges for ISKCON, but as a historian, the challenges that Christianity was facing and Islam was facing, the followers of Jesus, followers of Muhammad, were very great. And ISKCON's got a few bumps in the road, but comparatively, lots really been achieved. So you can look this up online. Again, just let's look on YouTube, Harvard University, 50th anniversary. There's a little 3-minute clip. ISKCON Desire did come like a news story about it. That's different. This is the original 15-minute film. The whole film is fantastic. This is just one clip. So keep that in mind. Every time you open that door and think Prabhupada touched that door, Prabhupada walked in this room, Prabhupada said, he ascended the room, Prabhupada chanted Hare Krishna. And from here, you see a picture of Mayapur, it started here. You see a picture of devotees chanting in London, it started here. You see a picture of devotees distributing food in South America, it started here. It all started here. Very, very, very special place. And now I'll turn it over to one of the people who was here. Hare Krishna. We have 25 minutes, right? 7:30?
Should I turn this off?
Yes.
Namo Krishna Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Vishimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamane Namaste Saraswati Deva Gauravani Pacharani Nivishesha Simavadi Paschatya Shattarani. Thank you so much for being here, seeing so many dear friends. Thank you, my dear friend Shilpa, Theo, everybody. Thank you. Haribo. Lead, Haribo. Yeah, so, so much to say. I was thinking about how Prabhupada came here and he was he was prepared to fail, actually. You know, you're probably all familiar with his prayers on the boat in Boston Harbor, where he was, you know, praying to Krishna, please, you know, make my words suitable for their understanding. How can I make them understand? This whole place is covered by the modes of passion and ignorance. How can I help them understand? And you can make me a success or failure, but please make me dance, make me dance as you like. So beautiful, so poignant. So, yeah, you know, there's a story that someone asked Prabhupada once, why did you decide to come to New York? Your Guru Maharaj sent disciples to London, so why did you go to New York? And Prabhupada said, because I thought if I was going to fail, I should fail somewhere different, in a different place. You know, so. And there's also, there's another backstory that I think is really interesting to tell. When Prabhupada was in Vrindavan, and finally, you know, he didn't want to come here empty-handed. So that's a beautiful thing also. I keep thinking, I'm looking at Theo and I'm remembering the t-shirt he designed, which I have at home. And you know this t-shirt where he's got Prabhupada walking and everywhere he puts his foot, there's flowers growing. It's really, you must get one of these t-shirts and wear it everywhere in New York. Anyway, yeah, so I was just remembering this one's story. So Prabhupada didn't want to come here empty-handed. And so he waited for these 3 volumes of the first canto, 3 volumes to be published. And you know, when we look at them, talk about quaint, you know, we think, oh God, so quaint, so many mistakes. But it's really quite poignant to actually be able to touch one of those original 3 volumes. And so, and you know, we never even really think, he had no money, paper was restricted, how did he even print those volumes at that time in India in the 50s? And he was starving, really, you know. He would go to the printer and the printer would say, Swamiji, have you had any breakfast? And he was just using every paisa, you know, he had for printing. Anyway, so he finally got these 3 volumes and he was in this little circle of sadhus in Vrindavan. And some of them were really quite sectarian minded. They were really not approving of him. You know, the rule is that sannyasis should not cross the ocean. Why? Because probably they'll just fall into nonsense. You know, most ordinary people, if they go out of India, away from Indian culture, they'll just get all, you know, bamboozled and bewildered. So really for good reason. But such people are not Prabhupada was not on that level. So anyway, they were very much against. Some of them, not all of them, but some of them were very much against his mission. And so it's a really sweet story. So he has his 3 volumes, and he says, these books are going to America. So please bless them. So he passed the books around the circle of sadhus, and each one of them, you know, maybe even unwillingly, they're touching the books to their head, and the books finally come back to him in the circle. And then he said, now someone has to carry them. So please bless me. So I think it's such a sweet story because he kind of tricked them. The way he tricked us, I think, you know. So I love that story. So yeah, you know, he was prepared to fail. And it's really quite miraculous. I mean, when you think at 70 years old, you know, we're like 70, over 70, and I think, I just don't even know if I want to walk across the street. You know, go to New York without a phone, without a credit card, without any money. You know, I mean, no, you know, it's inconceivable. So, yeah, you know, I always think that he really felt. I always feel like he heard our cries, and he felt our pain. You know, all the way over there in Vrindavan in India, that he could just. You know, because he was exemplifying that verse from Bhagavad Gita. What is it? Is it 6th chapter? Atma Pamyena. That, you know, a self-realized soul feels other people's pain to be just like their own. So, you know, I really always felt like he always felt our pain and came here feeling our pain. And I was hearing something, I don't know if any of you have been listening to the Bhagavata podcasts on YouTube. There have been 4 of them so far. So the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies is doing a series now called the Bhagavata podcasts. And they're having scholars who are also bhakti practitioners talk about one chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam in each session, 1 hour session. And so someone was saying, one of the scholars was saying that it says in the Hari Bhakti Vilas that if you're not qualified to speak on the Bhagavatam, Hare Krishna, welcome. If you're not qualified to speak on the Bhagavatam, then you can speak about Bhagavatas. You can speak about the people who live the Bhagavatam. So I thought that was really beautiful, and I think that's what we want to do here tonight. So I have some stories to share. So one thing I want to say is, we live in Washington, D.C., so we live in metropolitan Washington, D.C. We have our temple in Potomac, Maryland. It's a beautiful new temple. If you haven't visited, please come and visit. And we have the deity of Krishna, whose name is Madan Mohan, who was here at this temple. He was donated to Brahmananda and Garga Muni. He was a man named Mr. Sharna. Mr. Sharna. Is that right? Mr. Sharna. He had an Indian import shop called Bells of Sharna. I think it's Sharna. And he was selling bells and all kinds of things like incense. He had this Krishna in there. And, the devotees kind of saw him and they didn't really know what to do with him anyway, but they kind of, he was expensive. They just sort of saw him. And then one day he called them up and he said, come. Like so many artists, musicians, writers, I can get really depressive and narcissistic and even suicidal because they're thinking I'm a genius, and it's a gift, and we have to use the gift for the giver. So I think that's really important. Yeah.
Just in terms of the times, because you asked that question about today. I mean, when Prabhupada was preaching and when things were going on here and the movement first starting up, the general instruction was you quit whatever you're doing. It was all about you leave. You leave college, you leave your girlfriend, you leave your job, you leave everything, and you become a devotee. And whatever kind of talents you had weren't necessarily understood. I remember I was in the Denver temple and there was one man that was very interested in Krishna consciousness. He was a concert pianist. And we weren't sure how to engage him. And I can remember he was told, well, everybody starts washing pots. He's a concert pianist, and you're asking to stick your hands in hot water. There might be knives down there, and this is like his life. And we had no sense of how can you use that beautiful talent. So I think these days it's like the sky's the limit. I know when I talk to young devotees, it's like, well, what can I do? Well, what do you want to do? Just add Krishna. It's just, you want to be a lawyer? Great, well, be a lawyer for Krishna. Talk about how to turn things upside down. Be a disruptive force for Krishna. If you want to, have 10 kids, great, have 10 kids for Krishna. Want to drive a taxi? Great. Jayananda already did that. He taught us how to do that one. You don't want to be a businessman? Great, be a businessman. And run your company in a God-conscious way and treat your employees understanding that they're devotees of God. And have ethical practices by which maybe you don't make as much money as the guy next door, but people like working for you and your reputation goes, and you, before too long, you're beating the people that have lousy relationships with their customers and the government and everybody else because you've set a higher standard. And I personally think that's how Prabhupada talks about, when 2% or 5%, whatever it is, of the population becomes Krishna conscious, he says the world will change. I think that doesn't mean that they're necessarily, everybody's going to become a devotee of Krishna, but I think the way of interaction between human beings is going to change. Because there's going to be a percentage of lawyers that are Krishna conscious and percentage of judges and taxi drivers and plumbers. Just imagine you go to a used car dealership and the guy's a devotee of Krishna and wants to sell you the best car that you really need at the best price because he worships you as a devotee of God. What a change in experience. Right? We're from Washington. I won't talk about politicians, but just imagine how different things would be.
Yeah, and in terms of today, it's interesting because at that time, people were really dropping out. And now people want to know how does your tradition, whatever religion you are, how is it relevant? And how is it working to change the world? So, how is it authentic and how is it relevant? So I think, this comes to, the work that you're doing, the environmental work, and people want to know, is this just a bunch of ivory tower talk, or is this something that can really change the world? And this philosophy can really change the world. Some of the greatest environmentalists, like I think of Vandana Shiva, she always quotes, the name Vandana Shiva? She's this amazing tiger woman physicist who has this institute up in the Himalayas. In India, she's like a seed protector. Anyway, she quotes Ishopanishad, which says that everything in the universe is owned and controlled by the Supreme Lord. So therefore, we should not take more than our share, knowing well to whom all things belong. She quotes that when she's being interviewed by, the New York Times or New Yorker magazine and all of her conferences. So, this really is a world-changing philosophy. One other thing I want to say. Any other questions or thoughts? Time. Can I say one other?
Yeah.
Okay, so this man you heard at the beginning before the Shana Kirmani, so he became a really dear friend of ours. We were having a Vaishnav Muslim dialogue in Washington for a number of years, and he was spearheading it along with Anuttama Prabhu. And once he told us, he said, and actually he was there at Harvard studying hard sciences. But when he met Prabhupada, he decided to study theology as well. So he did a double major. He became an imam, as well as he spoke like 6 languages. He was amazing. But anyway, once he said to us, he's a vegetarian, Muslim vegetarian. And once he said to us privately, 2 things. Okay, so once he said to us privately, he said, I am a Muslim, and you'd think that when I have difficulties in my life, I would think of something from Islam, but I don't. I think of Prabhupada. Isn't that beautiful? And then so in Washington, we had at the Capitol Hilton Hotel, we had this 50th anniversary of ISKCON, kind of a nice gala event, and he was one of the keynote speakers, and he came. Bengali was not one of the languages he spoke a bunch of others, but anyway, so he wrote a poem for Prabhupada to speak at this event, and it was like a haiku. It was so beautiful. Because he was standing out in the hall, he was like going from, he was not there for divinity, but he was cutting through the divinity school to get to his science professor, head-cracking meeting with the professor. Anyway, Prabhupada stopped him in his tracks. So he said in this poem, he said, I was standing in a liminal space, which means an in-between space, out in the hall. He said, I was standing in a liminal space, and you gave me a flower which is still blooming today. He said, which is still blooming today. Isn't that beautiful? So thank you, Srila Prabhupada.
He said that in front of 350 people.
It was a total black tie event, Tulsi Gabbard came and played, the ukulele. Anyway.
And Shannon Rick.
And chanted Hare Krishna.
In her previous job.
In her previous. We won't go there.
Rukmini.